negative. It's a negative character. The same with some adjectives like noble or gentle. Think about aggressive, for instance. Aggressive is traditionally a negative term, but you've seen, especially in more kind of marketing, business talk, people talking about aggressive sales strategy, aggressive marketing strategy. So it's certainly kind of gaining positive connotations. So it shows how kind of changes in society are here being captured by changes in words. So taking, in a way, a more bird's eye view, people are thinking about how can we then capture vocabulary, or what would be the vocabulary that would capture the sense of given time. Okay, and here we're coming maybe, or initially, to historians who are trying to get the historical ideas of like what are the keywords for the 19th century Britain, or in terms of Koselleck German, let's say German social history. What are the kind of ideas that define what 19th century is versus 20th century is? And historians were coming with very much a kind of top-down view onto those keywords or ideas. So after reading many texts and knowing the field very well, they were able to come with the list of keywords that define a particular historical movements, or think about artistic movements, etc., etc. And those ideas, but nevertheless, those ideas were defined in very much top-down manner. So one of the questions in the Linguistic DNA project for us was how to get to those large ideas, large concepts in a bottom-up manner. How to understand what it meant to be, let's say, 16th century citizen for that person. What were the ideas that they had? What were the ideas that distinguished, let's say, early modernity to medieval times, as seen by the people themselves living through this time, not as seen by us? So what would the data tell us that the key words for, let's say, 16th century were, rather than historians? So this was, again, one of the kind of questions for us in Linguistic DNA project. We're also motivated by Raymond Williams' project on keywords. That's the project that is ongoing. This is where you get various then scholars to be writing at the kind of a definition of the given keyword. That is a social keyword that is salient to our society. So let's say education could be one of those keywords. Lockdown can be one of those keywords. And then we had other people who've been thinking about the language in terms of concepts, and saying that there must be almost like a baseline for the concepts that we have. So every human will have this set of concepts to signify the human's existence. This idea comes from at least Leibniz, when he talked about alphabet and human thought. Anna Wierzbicka took it further by trying to elicit the semantic primes, the kind of the minimal conceptual unit that are common in as many languages as her and her team could have investigated. What is the kind of common core, common conceptual core in the human thought? And then once you have this core, perhaps you can just see what are the specific concepts that are associated with given community, with given time, with given space. So against this body of research, I mean, I'm not doing justice to the whole body of research that is there on the topic, but just wanted to bring up those few approaches. We decided to pursue the idea of a concept that is a discursive concept, and this was the main focus on the Linguistic DNA project. So Susan Fitzmaurice, who was the lead on that project, says that in any particular historical moment, a concept might be encapsulated in any single word, phrase, or construction. Instead, it will be observable only via a complete set of words, phrases, or constructions in syntagmatic or paradigmatic relations to each other in discourse. So she tells us to look further than just a single word, single construction, single phrase. She would tell us to look at a whole set of words that are dispersed among the discourse. Okay, I'll just take a 10 seconds break. I can just see that my battery somehow it's not charging. I just need to investigate. Sorry. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Okay, it wasn't 10 seconds. But where should we start? How should we investigate that idea? So in Linguistic DNA project, we assumed then that the kind of the concepts will be living in discourse, so that they are not individual words, although they can be occasionally individual words. Certainly word lockdown is an individual word that signifies a concept that is emblematic of various actions. But many concepts will kind of live this, will only be read as concepts after we read the kind of the whole, let's say, page of the text or paragraph. Those concepts will not be represented by a single word. They will be represented by certain words being connected across a large window in discourse. By large window, we're looking here at the window that is certainly beyond the sentence level, a window of 200, 300 words, perhaps the whole paragraph. And with that approach, we have kind of built our linguistic DNA processor, a processor that kind of brings or takes the text and looks at combinations of words across larger discourses and looks for those combinations that are particularly strong, and the strength is measured by particular statistics, PMI statistics. And that's the core of the linguistic DNA algorithm, the linguistic DNA prototype, that the tool will scan the whole text that you have and will look at combinations of, let's say, 2, 3, 4 words, whatever you say, and those words across the large text, and will look at those pairs or trios or quads of words that are particularly strongly associated with one another across the large discourse of text. That's essentially what linguistic DNA does. Okay, now I will go into detail showing how it happens and which data we use, etc. So and this was the project that was led by Sheffield in collaboration with Sussex and Glasgow, and notice in the title that we were saying it's a project that looked at the evolution of English thought, less so about semantic change in traditional way. We wanted to see how the thinking changes by looking at those discursive concepts across time. And in order to let me just get the data first. So in order to explore those concepts, we looked at EBO TCP. So we have a significant amount of texts, 55,000 texts across several centuries. Before we could do any computational analysis of the text, those texts needed to be tidied in terms of spelling variation. We used Morph Adorner for that. And once the texts were kind of moved from like original text to the text that was then lemmatized for part of speech and was readable by the computer in terms of this kind of spelling variation, then we could run our processor. So the processor is using statistics called PMI, which is one of those mutual information measures. A lot of corpora will have the mutual information measures built in the program, but essentially this statistics allows us to get, let's say, pairs or trios or quads that occur more than expected by chance. So we won't be looking for the pairs that are let's say cat and then dog, because those are kind of expected by chance pairs. We're looking at those pairs that are less expected by chance. And we looked at the different window sizes to see what kind of conceptual information is presented in different window sizes. So how does the analysis, how will we proceed with the analysis? Well, let me show you an example of adjective sudden. Okay, I mean adjective. We wanted to look at kind of concept of suddenness. The reason why we've chosen sudden is that by looking at kind of historical thesaurus data, we noticed that the concept really exploded in early modern English. So I'm presenting here just a screenshot from this is Sketch Engine, typical concordance view of sudden in early in EBO and eco data here as well. And when I read the individual individual concordances, kind of with the kind of read as a human rather than as a kind of here the computer, I can see that around that adjective there are a lot of negative terms, violent, terror, accident, misery, death, disease, fear. So if I kind of approach the issue of meaning in traditional terms, like traditional linguists, I would say, okay, so there is a certainly negative flavor, negative connotations associated with sudden, okay? But here I've only read, there are like 20, 25 examples. I would have to go through all of those examples and read them and annotate them. Can we use the linguistic DNA processor to tell us what the prosodic meaning of sudden is without us kind of humans reading the text so closely? Well, that's what I want to show you what we've done. So I'm picking up here a text rather than, because like in linguistic DNA, we're starting from a text rather than concordance. And this text has got different window sizes highlighted, color-coded. So the immediate, in a way, sentence window of 10 words is in red around sudden. Then the larger window plus minus 50 words in orange yellow, and then the larger window in black. And then when I again read this text as I would my kind of as a human reader, I would notice that around the word sudden, there are negative terms. Indeed, rage, cruel, raging, shame, despised. Okay, but then when I go a bit further outside of that window, I'm looking here at window of 200 words. In the green squares, I see more positive terms. So there is wealth, joys, dear husband, grace, proud. Okay, so I would want to now use linguistic kind of DNA processor to see if word sudden is kind of surrounded by negative prosody in windows that are smaller, and then with positive prosody, the windows that are a bit larger. So I want to show you what we found when we look at pairs. So Saturn, pairs for Saturn in the window of plus minus 50 words. So it is the smaller window. And these are the pairs with associated PMI value, so the kind of statistics. And actually the PMI value is not that high. I would say that from 3.5 onwards, we can look at the PMI value as stronger. But indeed, many of those terms here are kind of negative. You've got roughness, danger, hazard, and then convulsion, greediness as the top ones. So instead of reading the many texts in EBO to see if the surrounding window of 50 words plus minus, so 100 words around Saturn are negative, we can actually use the linguistic DNA that will do this reading for us, and then we can have a greater kind of confirmation for this hypothesis that indeed words immediately around, immediately meaning plus minus 50 words, Saturn, show a little bit negative prosody. Then we did the same for the kind of positive prosody, and again, this kind of hypothesis based on human reading of the individual text indeed was confirmed when we engaged linguistic DNA processor reading the kind of larger texts. So the first advantage of linguistic DNA processor is that it can allow to read many texts in the way that the human reader would read them. Okay, so that's something that we haven't been able to do with, let's say, corpus linguistics so far. I want to show you trios with Saturn. For this, I use slightly different text. I wanted to see what are the kind of Saturn trios in Speed's History of Great Britain. This was published in 1611. And I wanted to, and I looked at different kind of Windows levels. I looked at window plus minus 5 and 10 and 30. But I wanted to show you what the kind of output looked like. So I said to the, in a way, to the processor, say, keep Saturn as the first word, and then you can vary word B and C, second and third word. But give me the most characteristic trios in this text as against the larger corpus, because you need that kind of reference. So, and those results come with very high PMI. You see the PMI of 23, 22. So these are very high PMIs here. There is some raw frequency here and chi-square. But now, as a kind of analyst, I would just look at those examples and see what is it that I see any kind of can I extract any kind of supra concepts here? One thing that surprised me when I looked at those examples is that Hastings comes up a lot as a noun. And then there's Chamberlain, behead. So, and there's actually one cluster here that is Saturn, Hastings, and behead. And when I read that, I thought, oh gosh, does it relate to a Battle of Hastings? I live in East Sussex, which is just you know, not just in the area of Hastings, and I thought, oh, maybe this was something about beheading during that battle. Clearly, Speed could have wrote about it. My knowledge of history was tested here because kind of it wasn't the text. And I went into the text and started reading the text that it actually was about very significant event in the history of Britain, which was beheading of William the Hastings, which was the first Baron of Hastings. And it was such a significant event in the history of Britain that this was almost captured by pictures. Okay, so this concept that was elicited for me as a trio of 3 words saying sudden beheading of Hastings was not only really characteristic and really significant of that as represented by linguistic DNA findings, but also this was significant from the point of view of history, as Speed was representing that history. And we see those visualizations of William Hastings, who was once one of the more powerful figures in England, but he was seen by Richard III as the threat to his rule. And Richard then decided to had him beheaded in the courtyard of the Tower of London, which was the first recorded execution at the Tower. And reading more about this event, this beheading was so unexpected and so sudden that they didn't even manage to build a proper structure for beheading. Sorry, I'm graphical, or maybe I don't know the vocabulary here of that particular concept, but it was so sudden. So the idea of sudden beheading of Williams was somehow captured by historians to the point where we have not one. I found another visualization of that painting, of that scene. It was also captured by the linguistic DNA processor as the trio around the adjective sudden here. Okay, so I hope that with that I show you kind of another advantage of looking at the concepts, because if the concept is salient to us linguistically, there's no reason to assume that it's not salient through other points of cognition, that it won't be salient in visual arts or in music, that those concepts could be pairing, could be found to be kind of complementing one another as through the representations of art and visual art and language. Okay. So when I was kind of exploring those concepts a little bit further, I won't kind of bore you with the individual steps in the analysis. But for instance, I found also a lot information about what conceptual information is presented in discourse at different levels. So for instance, I found that in the smaller windows around sudden, there was a lot of prosodic information, a lot of negative adjectives, but then outer windows didn't have much adjectives. If anything, they were a little bit more positive, and the topic-related concepts were living a little bit further. So you see that discourse is almost like we can talk about topography of discourse, that it goes through kind of tropes, peaks and troughs, presenting different information in its structure, different conceptual information in its structure. In Linguistic DNA project, we also played with visualizing those outputs, how to visualize concepts. We played with visualization based on slightly different data because we wanted here test visualization and not be necessarily drawn down by some problems with historical language. Ways of Being Digital project looked at many articles related to economy, society, etc. And this visualization represents trios of concepts. I will show you the links in a bit to all of those tools, but essentially each bubble here contains, so this whole bubble is concept of economy. Each bubble contains pairs of different concepts with the size signifying the strength of those concepts. So for instance, here the first bubble, see, it's technology and work, and then internet and use, etc. And if I zoom on one of the bubbles, bubble knowledge and transfer, it again will have individual concepts there. So that's a kind of way of exploring the concepts, and then using this computational, almost bird's eye view on conceptual structure of your text to then use it to guide you further into the analysis that perhaps is more detailed. Very quickly, I will talk about two challenges that we faced doing this project. One of the challenges was to find out what concepts also do in a discourse. So, for example, if we find out that the concept, let's say, of man and a woman are used a lot in the discourse as a kind of cluster, we don't know that much, about what the role of the man or woman in the given discourse was. So if there is if the man is kind of in the position of the doer or of the position of the object, or the other way around. So in the old base, myself and Julie Weeds, we looked at those questions by exploring Old Bailey Voices archive, and we basically used another approach to the concept and the kind of idea of semantic change, where we first where we transferred each concept to Samuel's concept. Samuel's concepts are the historical concept tagger developed by Glasgow University, so that we could then kind of query the data in a way that is kind of with this imposed conceptual structure, but also we added the dependency relations between concepts to the text. So just to repeat that in a different way, the text that is just a paragraph of, let's say, somebody's testimony from Old Bailey corpus was turned into a text of concepts with all the underlying information that was related to words, such as the position in the sentence, part of speech, dependency, being present. And this allowed us to look at things like what are the most characteristic concepts for different people in the courtroom, because in the courtroom we had people who were males and females, but only males could have the kind of legal position. So we wanted to find out how the different social groups talk about the different concepts differently. So for instance, we found out that when females were describing women, they were using mainly concepts of young, single, and poor. When females were describing men, they were using concepts associated to age. Whereas when the non-legal kind of males were describing women, they were using different concepts. So this was young and other. When they were describing a man, they were using also here young and other, so there was not that much variation. But we've seen that the same concept could be described in a way differently depending on who was using that concept, man or a woman. So there was a little bit of sociolinguistic variation over there as well. I've got another quick study to look at. I'm not sure if I have time. It's 12 minutes too. I'm looking at my chairs here.
You could talk for another 10 minutes, sure.
Okay.
Then we have half another hour left for discussion.
Okay, so another kind of idea to concepts that we've pursued was looking at concepts in mass observation data. So mass observation is a survey that collects diaries from people of what they did on the 12th of May. And so they collected this data for many years, and they basically asked people to record everything they did from when they woke up in the morning to when they went to sleep at night on the 12th of May. And we got a lot of those kind of diaries from across time, but especially a lot from the COVID years, so to speak. And this is a typical, not typical, this is maybe too short, but typical in terms of content, a diary response. So that person says that they woke up at a given time, that they went to the garden, they played, etc., etc. And then when I think about concepts and looking at text like that, I can see that there is a lot of concepts that are the same at the kind of higher conceptual level. So that person is talking about family members, which at the higher kind of conceptual level belong to the same conceptual category. So you've got my family, my little sister, my dad, mom, my sister, and my family again. And also that person talks about different games and playing. So I'm playing a game of third, playing online games, and playing with a ball. So again, I would want to read the text. Sorry, if I were to read this text as a corpus linguist, it would show no significance of any of those terms, because each of those terms are represented by different words. Obviously, there is verb play, and there is my family, I think, repeated twice. But generally, each concept here, let's say concept of playing and concept of family, is dispersed among many lexical items. And then this dispersion means that none of those individual items would come up as particularly significant if we look at the text from the level of words. So so we had an idea to turn again the text like that into a text of related concepts. And here we used WordNet to change a sentence such as like here, my dad, my mom, my sister, and I. We also lemmatized it, etc. But essentially, we ended up with two concepts: the concepts of first person, and then first person, and the concept of relative. So suddenly, 6 different words that would not come up as statistically significant in any kind of corpus research becomes 2 concepts with much greater statistical significance, or chance at least for statistical significance. So using, so that's kind of, we thought that that's kind of a solution to be dealing with texts that are not such big data. I mean, EBO and ECO for Linguistic DNA project were really large data sets, and we were able to run the statistics that we needed to get significant results. The problem with kind of linguistic DNA statistics is that it would struggle more with smaller data sets to gain the kind of the statistical significance. So one of the solution would be to move a text into a text of words into a text of concepts, just like what we've done with mass observation data. And then we could query this concept. So for instance, what we did, we wanted to find out what were the concepts that were characteristic of lockdown as opposed to the previous 9 years. And we also use PMI as a measurement, statistical measurement of the significance here. And this visualization shows the top 100 concepts that were characteristic of 12th of May 2020 in relation to the 12th of May of 9 years before. So what is that people were thinking about at that time as opposed to the previous 9 years? And then I'm going to zoom, lockdown, pandemic, SOR, furlough, etc. And this seems kind of obvious to us now because we all lived through the pandemic, but imagine applying this technique to the time that you don't have a reference of, that you're working on a time that is distant from yours, or on a language or community that you don't have much kind of cultural knowledge of. That's a way of kind of reading data in very kind of bottom-up way, giving us the conceptual fingerprint of the data. In the lab, the next thing that we want to do is to then apply the linguistic DNA processing of of the co-occurrence between the concepts. So just like linguistic DNA was focusing on co-occurrence between words in large windows, we would want to now look at concepts in large windows to get those kind of mega concepts. And that's the work that is kind of ongoing. And together with me, there are a few people who really like this kind of work. We are all in the kind of concept analytics lab. If you want to find out more or work with us, give us a shout. But to conclude our conversation, I just wanted to say that today I just wanted to give you a flavor of where we are going in terms of conceptual approach to language. And what are the research questions that we're asking? What are the problems that we are facing in terms of the size of the data, in terms of the processing of the data? I mean, the linguistic DNA processor is still, all to work, it's still quite computationally expensive. There are some kind of beta versions available online, and I'm just giving you some links here. And these are the beta versions with pre-downloaded data, or sorry, pre-uploaded data. So we have some technological issues still to deal with, but I hope that they will be kind of solved soon. And yes, and I think I just want to say there is so much more work in this conceptual sphere, finding out where the concepts live, how to get to the concepts that are significant. A lot of archivists or librarians that I speak to, they want to get that information, how to get the information on the, let's say, the keywords to annotate the text if the keyword is not present in a given text, etc., etc. So I do encourage people to perhaps be looking into this if you are at the stage of your research journey where you have a choice to choose your focus, research, and how to spend your research time. Okay, I think I'm going to conclude now. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for a kind of late start and for my kind of camera being somewhere else. That's a kind of working from home setup. But yeah, I'm looking forward to some questions.